Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and have with me Michael and Roman Neville. They are fantasy authors, and their first book, The First Bloodline, is the first of the series of the Blood of Cain series. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. And it looks like the book came out a couple years ago. Go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell us the genesis of the story.
Michael Neville and Roman Neville, father and son. And uh, I had this story, vampire story I'd written years ago, and my boys grew up and they'd read the story and they enjoyed it. But think hopefully that's what sent two of my other sons into writing and Roman came to me. I had to retire due to health issues, and Roman came to me and said, "Hey, let's rewrite your story. I've got some ideas." And I listened to his idea the story together, and it's been a fun exercise between the two of us.
Yeah, it's been really good. Like you said, my name's Roman Neville. I'm his son. I had read the book a couple of times, and then it was only a paper version that we had. So when I was in college, I started updating it, getting it on the computer so that he could actually play around with it. And as I read this story, it was very Anne Rice, Interview with the Vampire type. And so I started thinking about it and just wanting to evolve the story of vampires and kind of the mythology. And so I started throwing some ideas at him, things I thought could help the book or maybe change it from what's out there. And we kind of just grew from there.
It was Roman that really changed it to bring in the historical aspect, where we take real events in history and mix them. It's so much fun doing that.
Fantastic. So, you're writing as a duo. What's kind of the process as you're creating this novel?
Roman disagrees and argues with me.
So we've talked kind of through the structure of how the series is going to go and the books and everything. And essentially, what happens a lot of times is we'll talk about something and I'll come up with kind of an idea of where the story could go. Just kind of some of the details and some of the events we can intertwine in the story. And then usually my dad he'll start writing and he'll send me a chapter or two and I'll go back through and read through it and give him some notes, do some rewrites, and usually come back to him and tell him, hey man, you're so far out in left field, like I can't read this, or that's where we want to go with this, but let's add into it, let's add this into this, let's change this character, let's make this character more in depth or something.
We both love scary stories, and between the two of us, Roman, I've always felt I have a great imagination. Well, Roman has a vivid imagination, and he brings aspects into the story that I never would have dreamed of, so to where I just feel like we're twice the author that we would be alone at this point.
So you got great synergy as you're writing the story.
Yes.
Yeah, and we both kind of understand, like it was his original story that's the bones of everything. For me, I just did it and expanding it, but being able to kind of keep with his original outline for the story. So the original outline is still there, but we've just expanded it into so much more than it was before.
So you said it was a paper copy before. Was that all handwritten?
Yeah.
So you had to do the double duty of typing that up and getting it digital so that you guys can work on it back and forth. Did you when you rewrote it, did you start from scratch and rewrite the whole thing, or
It was actually, it was one print copy he had, because it was a copy he submitted in 1990 to a publisher to try and get it published. So it was the only print copy we had from 33 years ago now.
And what had
So
happened with that original story is I had submitted it to publishers, and they were excited about it and loved it, and sent back that they were interested and wanted the rest of it. Well, back then, you know, I had written like 3 chapters and then an outline of the rest of the story, and just sent it off to a bunch of people, and I wasn't expecting that kind of positive response. And so suddenly they want a story and I don't have a story, and they want it within like a week. And so I threw together the rest of this book in like a week and sent it off, and they wrote me back, said, it wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be. And so it just sat there, you know, and until Roman came to me, what, 33 years later or whatever it was, and said, hey,
Uh,
let's redo this.
it was in 2011, college football for Southern Utah. I picked it up and took the typed copy and put it in, typed everything up into the computer and saved it on a file for him and sent it to him so that he could start playing around with it.
Well,
So what's kind of the process now? Like, do you work from an outline, or do you just have like bullet points that you kind of go through? What do you do?
I have an outline written out. I don't share it with him because he goes off on his own direction. We'll talk through like the start of the story, where the story is going to end, and kind of the next books where they're going to go, and then I'll let him kind of work from there, like what he wants to do in between. And then as he starts writing, we'll talk about significant events that we want to happen in the book, whether a character
we argue over that. Characters dying.
definitely, or
That's probably the only time we argue.
you know, a character's arc, or you know, adding different events. Like usually I'll come to him, and as we started this second book, I wanted to weave in some ancient Mesopotamia history into it.
Yeah.
And so I had to do some research for that and bring it up to him and kind of tell him how we could
Me
weave that into
research
this
it.
story. Yeah.
Which was fun. And those are the kind of ideas Roman brings in. I mean, Roman will just bring in some crazy idea, and when we chase that down, we start chasing it down, and we weave it into the story, and it just it takes it in directions that I never would have imagined on my own. I think that's what makes it so much fun. And I say we argue, but we'll have playful arguing over whether we're going to kill off a character or not. But you know, you become attached to them? They're like your kids, you know. And I seriously, we're trying to get the second book finished, and I've had some serious problems with my health over the past year, and just trying to get those in line and trying to finish this book. And we started talking about killing off a character, and actually killed off a character in the second book. And I'm not kidding. I think I grieved for like 2 weeks for the death of that character.
Oh, they do become your children, and you know, Roman, you said you don't show him the outline because you know, Michael can go off on tangents and write, and that's kind of the fun thing about writing is sometimes your characters go places that you did not expect, and sometimes it's hard to you know, reel that back in. What do you guys do to reel that back in order to kind of follow this vision that you have?
Roman's the brakes.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's me reading through what he has. And I mean, we respect each other enough to tell each other no, or just hear each other's opinion. And so what I relate it to with him is he likes to take breaks from the story. And so a lot of times we'll take like a break from the story and go out to like, we'll call it an intermission, or a a memory. So we're gonna break from the story for like a chapter or two, and we're gonna go off on some event within the character's past, and it's going to relate to the character's overall growth and arc. But sometimes, and correlate it with him to like Guy Ritchie films. Guy Ritchie films will start with one story, jump to another story, and jump back to a third story, and then finally it all pieces into one. And so a lot of times for me, it's just coming in and being like, "Hey, man, I love breaking it up like that, but you're hitting it too close together where I think we're losing the story."
Yeah, he does a great job.
No, that's some
Which
great advice.
which for the record, I mean, we love this story, and we actually we know it's a 4-book series. We're just finishing up the second book right now, and we know how the story ends, or at least how the fourth book ends. It's a matter of how we get there, more than anything. And the story is a fun story. If you don't mind me telling you a little bit about the story.
Yeah, please.
Uh, it's about the fact that that when Cain slew his brother Abel in the field, he, in a dark pact with Satan, he drank his blood and actually became the first undead, basically vampire. Except that's not what we refer to them in the story actually that much. We created a whole arc as far as what the creatures in the story, some of the evil creatures are called, and uh, basically it's the fact that Cain had a family, and he went home, killed his whole family, but there's three sons that were left out of it, and one joined him in the pursuit of evil, and the other one's kind of in between, and then you have one, which is Michael, who's basically telling us evil for since the beginning of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where it is.
You want to talk about the Croats and Croatoan a
Yeah,
little
we can
bit?
talk about that. I think one thing with the story, though, it kind of that's important to the development of the characters is um, the story's about Michael and how he turns because um, his hate for his father and his brother, and it really starts out as it's a revenge. You know, he's out for blood, and just kind of dealing with his loss of humanity essentially for large part of the story, and then regaining his faith in humanity as the story goes on.
No, it's an amazing story. And, one thing about writing in general is you want to come up with a creative way to bring something new to a genre, right? Like vampires have been done so many different ways, but if you went back to Cain, kind of, the first typical humans, and said that it started from there. That's very original, very creative, and finding this humanity in this character, I think, portrays a different side of vampires that you don't see a ton of. And as a writer, as an author, that's kind of what you look for is taking kind of the the mundane and the fantastical and welding them together to create something new. So I love
Yeah,
that concept.
yeah, and it was interesting because in the original copy of the book that he had, it was actually a blood pact in the Wild West is where it started. This whole it was the original book was called what was it? It was
Blood sacrifice.
Blood Sacrifice. Yeah. So it was a blood pact essentially that turned him into one of the undead, Michael, the main character, back in the Wild West. And when I started reading it, I wanted to wrap in some of the real events like Cain and Abel. Everyone knows the story, whether or not people believe it or not. They know the story, and then just kind of turning a twist on the vampire tale that way, and also intertwining the mythology of from and zombies. Like they're all from the same bloodline from this first vampire from Cain and Abel.
Yeah, basically the story. There, there's another name we have. Can we tell them that, Roman? Can we tell them that
Sure.
much?
Yeah.
Uh, they have another. There's another name that Cain has taken on many names over history, and that one of the names that he took on was Croatoan, and we bring that's also in the first book. You're introduced into the lost colony of Roanoke, where the colony was wiped out, and the only thing that was left was burned. The name Croatoan, or was cut into a tree.
Yeah, it was
So there's
carved
been a
into a
lot
post.
of myths over what happened there, what the real story was, and um, according to Roman and I, we've got a manuscript here written by somebody that explains that um, in the story, Michael comes across this village that's been wiped out, and there's a scene in there that's important to the story. It was somebody that, a human that had shown him some kindness, and he's somewhat distraught after this happens, and he cuts the name Croatoan on the tree because he wants the world to begin to know the evil that's out there, that is his father. And from that, always refers to the blood drinkers as Croatoans, or Croats for short. And there's rules in the dark world that if they do more than drink the blood, if they eat the flesh, they will become more animalistic. And there's a frenzy that comes on, and they will become more animalistic in their features. They grow longer in their body and more animal like, and more savage. And that is when they become what is referred to as a lycanthrope, or what we would refer to as a vampire.
Werewolf.
And there's further rules that if, in this fire to eat the brain, that if they eat the brain, that it destroys something within them. It begins to destroy their brain, and they revert back to human form, and they slowly become stupid and dangerous. We refer to them as kind of like a great big cockroach, which wants nothing to do but eat and kill and scurry around to survive. And we refer to them as creepers. Is that right, Roman?
Yeah, and the lycanthropes are werewolves, not vampires.
Did I call
That's
them
where the
vampires?
yeah, that's where the werewolf mythology comes from. It's actually something we're going to touch on in another book, as far as some of that Native American lore and the
Shapeshifters.
skinwalkers and some of the shapeshifters
Yeah.
in Native American legend.
So
We
you
love
guys,
bringing all the legends into play.
Yeah,
well, and this is kind of amazing. Like you guys have taken in all these, these horror villains, vampires, werewolves, zombies, like you said, skinwalkers and other things, and have been able to explain and create a mythos for each of them through this one blood pack, basically, from game. So that's very creative, and for anybody who's watching, like, and anybody who's listening, this is a great example. This is a great tip or trick to, if you love, these scary things, or if you love, even high fantasy, and you can explain why there's like wizards and satyrs and magic, and like if you can tie this all together, like it's a very creative way in order to, create this mythos that you can build off of. So that's a great tip or trick for anybody that looking for this. Michael, since you do most of the writing, what is some of your writing habits?
Well, I've got MS, and so it kind of revolves around my health. It's a matter of when I get up and how I'm feeling. Usually, in the afternoon is when I'm feeling a little better and my hands are a little steadier, and I can actually sit down and write. The story goes on in my head all the time, two lives at times, because I've got this whole other story that is revolving around in my head all the time. And and I hit sometimes I go to bed, and it's rattling around in there so much I can't get sleep, and I have to get up. So um the story is just there. So we really need to finish these four books so I can get some sleep.
And then are you trying to do like a certain amount of chapters a week so Roman can review them and critique them, or do you just kind of, I mean, because of MS, it's a very serious illness, or do you just try to get what you can get and go from there?
We used to try and do try and get so much done, and Roman's been pretty patient with me as I've had some more serious health issues over the past year, but we're finally getting those, starting to get those under control, and looking forward to we really want to get this next book finished up within the next 30, 60 days. And I would also like to add that for any, when for anybody that pulls up, you can get the book on Amazon, and it's easy to access. It's First Bloodline, Book of Cain, or yeah, Book One,
Blood
Blood
of
of
Cain.
Cain. And um, the thing that's cool about it, I always tell, I'll have people will reach out to me and tell me that they want to get the book, or I'm talking to people, and I always tell them, get on Amazon and pull up the audio sample of the story, because we between Roman and I, we were very fortunate that we were able to get this actor over in Ireland. Roman is the one who researched and found him and did all this, and he was out of our price range, and he loved the story, and he ended up doing it, working out a deal with us and doing it because he loved the story. And if you just listen to the audio sample, even if you don't do the audio book, I've never used to do audio books, and because I like the pages, but you want to listen to you can get on Amazon and actually pull up the audio sample. And if you do that, you hear his voice. And then even if you just read the book afterwards, you've got his voice in there, because I tell you, he brings the story to life, in my opinion, in a way that just really shocked and surprised me. Roman, how do you feel about that?
No, I mean, I remember researching, and I had two voice actors I really wanted for the book. I'd heard their samples, and then I spoke with the guy that ended up voicing our book, and he did a sample for us. And it was kind of one of those things where I had two guys that I'd done a bunch of research on, and I really liked, thought they were perfect. And then he came along, and I was like, you know what? I can't go with anybody else but this guy. This guy's just the voice for Michael. He's the voice for our story.
I felt that way as well, and I just want to give a shout out to his name's Paul Moran,
Yeah.
and he's just simply amazing.
So that's the one thing about independent publishers is you are in charge of everything. So what sort of resources, Roman, did you look into finding the voice actor?
So I went on Audible, or ACX, I think is what it's called. And you're allowed to search narrators. They have thousands on there. And so I probably listened to 500 or so different voice actors. And then I also let people audition if anybody wanted to. And some people would put in audition tapes, and some people were very good. They just weren't quite right. And that's actually how I found Paul. Is I had requested the two that I wanted for the book to audition, and they did, and they were interested. And Paul was one of the random auditions that just submitted for the book. And he ended up being perfect, falling in love with it just like we did. And him and I have talked quite a bit. He's been bugging me, asking me when the second book's coming out, because he's tired of narrating kind of some of the other stuff he's doing. But he's excited for the second book, and he'll be back for it. So we're happy.
Yeah,
That's
we're very
exciting.
excited to have him back.
No, that's awesome. Another thing, like I said before, indie publishers are in charge of everything. That includes selling your book. What have you guys done to market and try to get that out there?
Roman's in charge of that.
I'm in charge of it, but I haven't done a whole lot. We did a FanX in Salt Lake City. That's where we met you.
Mhm.
We
That was
got
a lot
on
of fun.
Amazon. Yeah, it was a ton of fun. We actually met a lot of people we never would have met before.
Yeah.
And we took our book there to sell it, and honestly ended up giving away, I would say 90% of the books that we brought, just to try and grow our audience and get more people reading the book and just hearing about it.
Roman and I have
And
a different approach than most people. We didn't come into this to make money. I mean, we give away more books than we sell, simply because we love the story and we want people to be able to have the opportunity to enjoy it as much as we do.
yeah, we've donated a couple to some public libraries
Yeah.
and things like that, just to try and increase the exposure.
Well, I've talked to a few authors. I don't know if you know about the 20 books to 50K Facebook group and convention and whatnot. But it's a big group of people who are authors and help each other, and they write in a myriad of genres. But I went to a conference in 2021, I think, and one of the authors, she said that she's given away over like 1 million books.
Yeah.
So I
Really?
mean that that in and of itself, like that helps your audience grow. It helps get people to see that book and to know who you guys are. But it also another adage that I kind of learned is your first book doesn't make a lot of money. It's your second book, and your second book will help sell your first book. So like that's you guys are working on your second book. That is something that from what I've talked to people and what I've learned, that it's the second book that'll help your first book, and the third book will help on both. And I don't know if you ran into this at Fan X or not, but walking around your booth, you guys had a lot of authors there, but there were people who would say like I'll wait till the series is finished, and so there's lots of
Yeah.
hesitancy on that as well. It's like you guys have one book out now, number two is coming up. It's going to be a four big series. Lots of times people wait until it's all complete, and then you start selling a whole bunch. Have you guys seen something similar to that?
I've heard that.
I've heard that too, and that's honestly one of the reasons why, yeah, we sold a couple of copies when we've done the book events, but it's also why when we went into FanX, we ended up, even though we were selling copies, there was enough people that were interested, but they were kind of, oh, I wish you guys had more of the series done, and that's why we ended up I think we gave away probably $500 worth of books
Oh
at
wow.
FanX, which for us, I mean, some people might be like, "Oh, that's not very much." Like you said, the lady gave away $1 million worth of her first book. For us, it was like, a couple hundred copies, and we're like, "This is out of our own pocket." I mean, we just want to get the
Yeah.
name out there, knowing that book 2, 3, and 4 are coming.
How was that? Like you were in a group of a ton of people. How'd you get involved with them?
Through Roman's brothers.
Yeah,
Bo and
my
Cole.
little brother, he befriended Robert. I think Zangari's his name. Do you remember?
Yeah, Robert and
I'm
Dan
not.
Zingari.
Yeah. So my little brother Cole, him and my brother Bo have a book that you interviewed them for, but they befriended Robert and told Robert about us, and so Robert reached out to us, and we just ended up going in as part of their group.
And I've actually interviewed quite a few people from that group of authors. And I've said this before, but if you haven't heard the previous interviews, I'm going to say it again. It is a great way to save money going to conventions, going in with other people.
Oh yeah, those booths are not cheap.
No, they are not. So I mean, Michael, you could have written in any genre. What kind of drew you to fantasy and speculative fiction?
I've loved horror stories from the time I was a kid, and probably good, bad, or ugly, but I brought my boys. I've got 4 sons, and they all grew up with the horror genre. I mean, I love good old, and I never really got into a lot of the slasher and these other things, but I love good old fashioned monster stories. I mean, I love the old fashioned stories and legends that have been around forever about vampires and werewolves and zombies. I mean, these are real stories. I mean, we've all scared each other. I would It was the kind of house they grew up in, where on Halloween I put on a scary mask and a long coat and a long wig and go out and stand in the field as they'd be bringing the garbage cans up. We had a long private road, and I got Roman and his brothers a few times with that one.
So, do you remember kind of the first stories that drew you to that genre?
Yeah, when I was a little tiny kid, I was a little kid. I probably wasn't supposed to, I don't know, be watching this scary show. And it was like the old black and white version of the Blob or something. I don't remember, but I'm watching on this old black and white TV, an old black and white version of a horror story, and I'm laying down with my, my hands, like this, where you was a little kid and you're watching the TV, and I'm in the middle of this scary story, this monster story, and the TV, and this is not made up, the TV screen shattered. It like got too hot and shattered over top. I thought the monster was literally coming out of the TV after me. Just terrified me. And as a little kid, I'd sleep with my covers up around my neck because I didn't want the vampires to get me while I was sleeping and things. And so I just always loved scary.
I've always loved scary stories. I don't know. I think for me, it started just kind of how we grew up. I mean, you were always scaring us. Granny, my dad's mom, she would wear masks and try and jump out and scare us growing up. And I remember watching The Thing with Kurt Russell when I was like 6. And I don't know, it kind of
tell
started
things like that, probably.
Yeah. It kind of started from there. I was like, oh, this is so cool and scary. I love it. And so it
And their
just kind
mother
of went from
hates it.
there.
So I could never watch scary shows with my wife because that actual show, The Thing with Kurt Russell, my wife and I when we were dating, I showed her this. I told her, no, that'd be okay. And she refused to ever watch another scary movie with me again. And so my boys were the only ones, I ended up having to share with my boys. And I'm really hoping I did not scar them for life. But,
Well, I
3 of
mean,
the 4 grew up and became an author. So I think we're okay.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
my wife's so bad, and it's kind of been one of those things where since I got married, I have to watch them at night after my wife's fallen asleep by myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that I like them more now because of it. But like my wife is one of those people, like if you walk up behind her and she doesn't hear you and she turns around, she will jump scare herself without you doing anything. You just have to be walking around. And so that's one thing like I've missed because I love scaring people. But with her, like I've had to like super tone it back. And so just finding another avenue for that. And it's been writing.
Oh, that's awesome. So who are some of your guys' influences?
I've read, I mean, I always enjoyed, I think two of the bigger influences on my writing. I mean, I read so many. I mean, I read a lot of authors that I enjoyed: Dick Francis, John D. MacDonald. Um, uh, what was his name? Wrote the Spencer series. Can't even think of it right now. But but I think it came down in many ways. I loved, enjoyed Stephen King, and I enjoyed Dinar Koontz. And the difference that I came between the two was I felt that Stephen King would, his books, they'd be scary and whatnot, but I always felt that I don't know, I felt like there was kind of a hopelessness in the story, where there's just no hope. And where Dinar Koontz, I felt like in the end, his book or his story would be a scary story, but with maybe a light-hearted edge to it, to where maybe there is some hope. I love the story, Odd Thomas, and with this story, I mean, basically, it's good versus evil. I believe there is good, always will be good versus evil, in life, and in the end, I'm hopeful that good will conquer over evil, but that's no guarantee. And we see that in the world around us today. And
Roman, who are some of your influences?
Um, I grew up reading a lot of James Patterson and Louis L'Amour. Um, Stephen King was definitely one of my favorites growing up. I remember reading Dreamcatcher a couple of times when I was in like 6th and 7th grade. And that's honestly where me and my dad differ is I have a separate book I'm working on that is also in the horror genre. I want scare the crap out of you, scare the pants off, and I want it to seem hopeless. And I'm okay if everyone dies at the end. Like, I'm okay if there's not a happy ending. Like, I just want it to be a good book to scare the crap out of you. And so my book I'm working on is strictly horror, and I want you to have creepy and crawlies the entire time, like Stephen King
A little
books.
darker.
Yeah, a little darker. And so I think that, that's more of the Stephen King influence for me, is I want that, darkness in the story.
And I think I was more like that maybe when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, I think I'm looking to. I mean, we enjoy. There's definitely humor in the stories, and there's a sarcastic wit that bites throughout the entire story. But I believe where Roman and I maybe are better with each other than without. We'll find out later because we have individual projects as well. But I believe it's the combination of, I don't know, I don't want to say dark and light because that sounds bad with Roman, but that we bring to the story. I believe that we balance each other out well in that direction of hope versus hopelessness.
Roman, since you are working on your own story, what are some of your writing habits for that?
I work a lot, and we just had our first child, and working on the book series with my dad, it's more or less just when I have spare time on my own where I don't want to sleep, that's just kind of when I work on it. It's something that I'm not strict where I'm like, oh, I want this out by the end of this year in 6 months. I'm okay with just it taking its time and taking a back seat for now while we focus on the other stuff. Whenever he sends me something, I try and make sure that I put an hour or two into it, kind of a day type of thing, because it ends up being looking for all the previous revisions, and then I'll go back through and once I fix the previous revisions, see what he's done there, read through the entire book to kind of make sure I didn't miss anything, and then um, start on some new writing for the next chapter, the next section of the book, and give him a plot line or an outline kind of to work on from there. And I try and work it that way, just an hour or two at a time.
So, what are some things that you have been surprised about, and what are some things that you've been like very happy about?
You mean as writing or writing with my dad?
Well, you can do both.
Um, One of the things, and it's no fault to him, as far as writing, is we'll talk about something and he'll just completely forget about it because of the MS. And so some through before we finally get it into the story or get it written correctly, just because of his medical condition. Um, but one of the things I've really enjoyed is it really allows me to be more creative that way. One of the things that it's hard is you have to reread the story 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And so I didn't realize how many times I would reread our own story, but I think I've read it more than anybody else has.
What about you, Michael? What has been some of the joys and some of the challenges of bringing the story to life?
The biggest joy for me is I've enjoyed Roman and I've always enjoyed spending time with each other, and the collaboration um, is just special. We and I enjoy the time that we say the creative input, bouncing back and forth. I mean, I was in business. I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed the brainstorming sessions where you'd really get in and dig in and look for better ways to sell your widget or whatever, and with Roman, it's a matter of when we really get in and we just let our imagination fly and we go down different, and Roman will take me down a path that I never would have thought of on my own. And so I feel it's just, I don't know, I get excited about the calibrate or the collaboration.
honestly, I'd probably say that's probably one of the main reasons we work well together is I enjoy kind of crafting a story and inserting things in the character development, kind of like outlining an arc and stuff like that and growing the story. But I don't, I love to write out the details for it, but I don't enjoy the mundane part of the writing, which is part of the reason I think that my book I'm okay putting on the back burner is I don't want to sit and write a log and all that type of stuff. Like I want to take one specific scene and I want to blow it up into this big grand event with all these details and all these things that occur in this big event. But then I don't want to continue writing after that. It's like, okay, I'm done. You can have it back now. It's yours. You continue writing with the story and the characters interacting and everything.
No, that's amazing. So your plans this year, do you have any plans to go to any conventions that somebody that's listening to this can meet you guys?
I know we're planning at this point, try and make the Comic-Con or Fan X or whatever they do in Salt Lake City, a yearly thing. We talked about doing some others, but haven't so far.
And then how can people get a hold of you? How can they find you?
They can find our book Kindle store. It's available on the Kindle store, paperback, hardcover, Audible. As far as getting a hold of us, reach out to us on our author page. Leave us a review. You know, I check those just to make sure that somebody doesn't leave some great review. Like maybe we got some movie studio that wants to try and set something up with our book, but no, I love hearing from what people think of our book and looking at the reviews, just kind of get their opinions because I think the fans' opinions matter. So somebody writes in there like, "Oh, that was so cool how they did that in the book," or "I didn't enjoy this." Like we take it to heart, and it's like, okay, well maybe we need to tweak things a little bit in the next book and change things. So we're available
Absolutely.
on Amazon and leave a review and we'll read it. And so if you want to get a hold of us, you can definitely get a hold of us.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for getting on with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you,
you.
Carson.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.